In some breaking news, Defence Secretary retired Major General Kamal Gunaratne has urged the public to refrain from damaging personal and public property. In a special video statement, the Defence Secretary said a group has been resorting to violence in the name of peaceful demonstrations. The Defence Secretary noted that peaceful demonstrations will be permitted despite the emergency laws that are currently in place. Good afternoon and welcome. This is Lunchtime News on News First, where the people come first. Let's first take a look at your headlines for this afternoon.
Parliament heats up. Ruling party MPs decide to represent themselves as a separate group.
එනිසා අපි කණ්ඩායමක් තීන්දුව කරලා තියෙනවා අනන්‍යව වෙනම කණ්ඩායමක් හැටියට මේ පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ වෙන්නේ. ඒ 16 දෙනාම තවදුරටත් ස්වාධීනව කටයුතු කරනවා කියන එක මම විශේෂයෙන් දැනුම් දෙන්න ඕනේ.
අද සිට අපි පාර්ලිමේන්තුව තුල ස්වාධීනව කටයුතු කරනවායි කියන එක කියන්නට ඕනේ.
An MP from Rishad Badidin's party joins. The proposal to abolish the executive president must be brought to Parliament this week, says opposition leader Sajid Premadasa. People's protest opposite President's office, Temple Trees and opposite Basil Rajapaksa's house. Engaging in violence will lead to arrests, says police. Nandalal Veerasinghe to become new CBSL governor.
A harsh exchange of words was witnessed in Parliament when sessions began this morning. Parliamentarians of the Sri Lanka Freedom Party and 11 other parties were among those in the government who declared that they would serve independently. The parliamentary sessions are taking place as the government risks losing a majority today. The MPs representing the opposition parties raised questions from the government regarding the prevailing political crisis. Now, the regulations under the Medical Ordinance and regulations under the Convention Against Doping in Sport Act are to be taken up for debate today. Former Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe raised questions as to how these matters can be taken up for debate given the absence of a health minister and sports minister. Thereby, he called on the House to postpone the scheduled debate and instead discuss the future course of action.
පාර්ලිමේන්තු සම්ප්‍රදාය අනුව ඇමතිවරයා ඉන්න ඕනේ මේ පනත් ඉදිරිපත් කරාම මේක පාර්ලිමේන්තු සම්ප්‍රදාය. ඒ සම්ප්‍රදාය අපි කඩ කරනවා. අද ඒ ඇමතිවරු නැතුව මේ කාරණේ කඩගත්තොත් සෞඛ්‍ය ඇමතිවරු එන්නේ නැද්ද?
Now, leader of the Sri Lanka Freedom Party, former President Maithripala Sirisena, informed the Parliament that MPs representing the SLFP will remain independent in Parliament. He said the MPs will no longer represent the government. He also informed that the SLFP does not agree with declaring public emergency in the country. Former President Maithripala Sirisena also called for the 20th Amendment to be abolished and 19th Amendment to the Constitution to be enforced with amendments.
ශ්‍රී ලංකා නිදහස් පක්ෂයේ පාර්ලිමේන්තු කණ්ඩායම අපි 14 දෙනෙක් ඉන්නවා. මේ 14 දෙනාම අද සිට අපි පාර්ලිමේන්තුව තුල ස්වාධීනව කටයුතු කරනවායි කියන එක කියන්නට ඕනේ.
Leader of the opposition Sajid Premadasa said that there should be no voice in Parliament apart from the voice heard in from the streets. While pointing out that the people want a change in the government, the opposition leader pointed out that the Parliament must understand what the people need. He also said the Samagi Jana Balawege will not accept any ministerial positions and the power will only be obtained with the blessings of the people. Opposition leader Sajid Premadasa said the proposal to abolish the executive presidency must be brought to Parliament this week.
මේ ජනාධිපති පට්ටම් අගමැති පට්ටම් ඇමති පට්ටම් ඔයා ඕක ගන්න මම මේක ගන්නම් මෙයාව සභාපති කරන්න එහෙම 113 වල හැදිලා ආපහු රට කන්න දෙන්න බෑ අපි ප්‍රතිපත්තියක් මත වැඩපිළිවෙලක් මත රටේ ප්‍රශ්න විසඳන තැනකට ඇවිල්ලා අපි එකතු වෙමු එකක් මම කියන්නම් මේ සමගි ජන බලවේගයේ සමගි ජන සන්ධානය අවස්ථාවාදීව මං හිතන්නේ මං කතා කරන්නේ හැමෝම වෙනුවෙන් කවුරු හරි විරුද්ධ වෙනවා නම් ප්‍රසිද්ධියේ මෙතනම නැගිටලා කියන්න විරුද්ධයි කියලා ඒකටත් මගේ ප්‍රජාතන්ත්‍රවාදය තියෙනවා බය වෙන්න එපා විනය පරීක්ෂණ ඉන්නේ නැහැ පක්ෂෙන් අස් කරන්නේ නැහැ විවිධ මත තියෙනවා නම් කොන්දක් තියෙනවා නම් නැගිටලා කියන මේක වැරදි කියලා. අපි එන්නේ නැහැ මේ తాවකාලික අමතිකම් ගන්න. අපි එන්නේ නැහැ අවස්ථාවාදී අමතිකම් ගන්න. අපි එන්නේ අවස්ථාවාදී රාජ්‍ය නියෝජ්‍ය අමතිකම් අරගෙන මේ ඇමති සංගීත පුටු සෙල්ලම ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්න. හැබැයි නිවැරදි දැක්මක් තුල ඇත්ත කතා කරලා නිවැරදි ගමනක් යනවා නම් මේ රටේ ලක්ෂ 220 වෙනුවෙන් කරන හැම හොඳ වැඩකටම අපේ ආශිර්වාදය තියෙනවා. අපේ ආශිර්වාදය තියෙනවා.
Now, the Tamil National Alliance MP President's Council M.A. Sumandiran said the Parliament must approve or disapprove the proclamation of emergency in the country.
There is a notification tabled today on the proclamation of emergency. Under the Constitution, this must be placed before Parliament and approved or disapproved at the earliest possible opportunity. I want to ask the government to place this tomorrow for Parliament to decide whether Parliament will approve of this or not, because otherwise they are misusing the powers by allowing it to remain for 14 days and then lapse. Even now we can suspend the standing orders and place the proclamation of emergency for a vote in this Parliament now.
Multiple protests were staged by the people with no political affiliation in various parts of the country against the current government and the prevailing crisis situation.
The Catholic bishop staged a silent protest this morning. Archbishop of Colombo, His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjit, Reverend Father Cyril Garmani Fernando and a number of others joined the silent protest.
At last the nation has awakened from its slumber. Now we have realized that we have been deceived left, right and center. But over the decades, this country has been ruined and robbed, especially by the corrupt political leaders. Now the whole country, from the north to the south, from the west to the east, from all 8 directions in this country, for the first time in our history, everyone is crying out that the leadership steps down.
A protest is currently being held by artists at the Parliament roundabout.
මේ වෙලාවේ කියන්න තියෙන්නේ ජනතාවගේ හඬට කරුණා කරලා සවන් දෙන්න. මොකද ඕනම දේශපාලඥයෙක් බලය හම්බුණාට පස්සේ සම්පූර්ණයෙන් හිටපු කෙනා නෙමෙයි. අපි මේක අවුරුදු ගාණක් තිස්සේ දැක්කා.
අපි අවංකව ඉල්ලා සිටිනවා ඔබ සියලු දෙනාම ගෞරවනීය නම්බුකාර ලෙස මේ බල තණ්හාව අතහැරලා ඔබලා බැහැලා යන්න.
ජනතාව කියනවා මේ ක්‍රමවේදය හරි නෑ.
The people staged protests last night as well.
A protest was staged opposite the President's office last night. The crowd attempted to topple over the barricades last night. The Inter-University Students' Federation marched towards the temple trees last night. The IUSF then staged a protest opposite the temple trees last night. protest was also staged opposite Basil Rajapaksa's residence last night.
The people chanted slogans demanding the resignation of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and the government for failing to resolve the problems of the country.
People held a demonstration near the residence of parliamentarian Kele Rambukwella in Kandy. Police fired tear gas to disperse the protesters. A protest was held in Polonnaruwa opposite the residence of State Minister Roshan Ranasinghe last evening.
More protests were staged last night.
A protest was staged in Kiribati last night.
Sir, never thought I come to Watakinova. May undergive a Kennedy, may undergive a water, may undergive a handwater.
Gota Mokada Karane, Horaka
The people staged a protest in Dematagoda last night against the present political crisis and the cost of living. Another protest was staged by the people in Harlialan last night. People in Habaradua also took to the streets last night.
Sri Lankan expatriates are staging protests overseas against the prevailing economic crisis in the country.
A protest was staged by Sri Lankan expatriates opposite the Sri Lankan embassy in Washington, D.C., the Ohio State University and the Times Square in New York.
Go home, go ta.
The Sri Lankan expatriates in Canada also staged a protest against the incumbent government in Toronto and Montreal.
Sri Lankan President! Go home! Sri Lankan President! Go home!
මෙන්න විශේෂ පුවතක් ජනාධිපති නීතිඥ අලි සබ්රි මහතා මුදල් අමාත්‍යදුරෙන් ඉල්ලා අස්වේ තිබෙනවා. ඔහු නව මුදල් අමාත්‍යවරයා ලෙස ජනාධිපතිවරයා ඉදිරියේ දිවුරුම් දුන්නේ ඊයේ දිනේ. මීට පෙර ඔහු අධිකරණ අමාත්‍යදුරේද හොබවනු ලැබුවා. මෙන්න මේ පුවත යාලෙත් ජනාධිපති නීතිඥ අලි සබ්රි මහතා මුදල් අමාත්‍යදුරෙන් ඉල්ලා අස්වේ තිබෙනවා. ඔහු නව මුදල් අමාත්‍යවරයා ලෙස ජනාධිපතිවරයා ඉදිරියේ දිවුරුම් දුන්නේ ඊයේ දිනේදී. මීට පෙර ඔහු අධිකරණ අමාත්‍යදුරේද හොබවනු ලැබුවා. ජෙෆ්රි
ஸ்துதி ஒமாயா விசேட செய்தியூடாக உங்களை சந்திக்கிறோம். ஜனாதிபதி சட்டத்தரணி அலி ஷப்ரி சற்று முன்னர் நிதி அமைச்சர் பதவியிலிருந்து ராஜினாமா செய்துள்ளார். நேற்றைய தினம் ஜனாதிபதி முன்னிலையில் அவர் பதவியேற்றமை குறிப்பிடத்தக்கது. இதற்கு முன்னர் அவர் அலி ஷப்ரி ஜனாதிபதி சட்டத்தரணி அவர்கள் நீதி அமைச்சராக கடமையாற்றியமை குறிப்பிடத்தக்கது. அந்த விசேட செய்தியினை மீண்டும் அறிய தருகிறோம். நிதி அமைச்சராக இருந்த ஜனாதிபதி சட்டத்தரணி அலி ஷப்ரி சற்று முன்னர் தன்னுடைய பதவியை ராஜினாமா செய்துள்ளார். இதுதான் தற்போது கிடைத்த விசேட செய்தி.
In some breaking news, President's counsel Ali Sabri has resigned from his position as finance minister. In a letter to President Gotabaya Rajapaksa today, he said that the president should appoint a new finance minister. The former minister noted that fresh and proactive unconventional steps need to be taken to navigate the crisis. He said he had accepted the post of finance minister only as an interim measure until a sustainable solution is found. Back to some local news. All 12 suspects who were arrested during the protest staged near the Carlton House in Tangol yesterday have been granted bail early this morning. The protesters were produced before the Tangol acting magistrate at around 1 a.m. today.
The suspects were arrested on charges of illegal assembly, causing injuries to police officers, and under the Public Property Act for causing damages to a bus during the protest. A total of 18 lawyers represented the protesters.
My group of lawyers and I took the attention of the court to the 14th article of the Constitution, where the people have exercised the right to protest and to gather as peaceful groups. There were few people who behaved violently, and 3 are hospitalized at the Tangol hospital now. It is because of those minor groups that the police had to fire tear gas, but these people have only gathered peacefully.
Police say they will arrest individuals and groups involved in violent and unruly behavior.
In a statement, police said several protests and protest campaigns were staged in various parts of the island last night, adding that there are reports of arson, trespassing and other acts of misconduct by certain groups. Accordingly, police noted that the perpetrators behind such acts have already been arrested and further investigations are underway based on video evidence, while pointing out that the people have the right to engage in peaceful demonstrations and protests. Police informed the public not to engage in violent activities.
Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe has been appointed as the governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. Speaking exclusively to Newsfirst, Dr. Veerasinghe said he accepted the president's offer to take up the post of CBSL governor and will take over as the governor on the 7th of April. Dr. Veerasinghe also served as the alternate executive director at International Monetary Fund. He is a former deputy governor of the Central Bank. Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe has a PhD and master's degree in economics from the Australian National University and a BSc degree from the University of Kelaniya in Sri Lanka. He will be replacing Ajit Niwat Cabral, who stepped down yesterday. Now, the selling price of the US dollar at licensed commercial banks has increased to 310 rupees. In some news overseas, US President Joe Biden has called for Russian President Vladimir Putin to be tried for war crimes as evidence emerges of atrocities allegedly committed by the Russian forces in Ukraine.
There is mounting international anger over the alleged killing of civilians in Bucha, a town near the capital Kyiv. Biden said, quote-unquote, "This guy is brutal," adding that he believes Putin is a war criminal. Without evidence, Russia said images of atrocities had been staged by Ukraine. US officials say they are supporting a team of international prosecutors heading to Bucha to collect evidence. The Ukrainian government has started a war crimes investigation after it said the bodies of 410 civilians had been found in areas around Kyiv. Some were discovered in mass graves, while others had their hands tied and had apparently been shot at close range. Officials in Kyiv also accused Russian forces of killing a village head, her husband and her son in a village for aiding Ukrainian troops in the area.
And that's a wrap of this edition of Lunchtime News. For the Newsfirst team, I'm Azra Hassan. Stay with Newsfirst as we will keep you updated on what is happening in the country. Until then, stay safe.